Hi, I'm Ibukun. As we say in Durham, these are like your Durham stats. So I'm a first year marketing student. I am 19. I'm in South College at Durham University. I think I've covered everything. Did I miss something? I always say it's sort of funny because a lot of people think as like marketing is like quite manipulative. And in a way, that's why I chose it, because I think it's really interesting how they like shape the way people see things and how the world is sort of around them. And I remember sort of like hearing stuff like, like 10,000 steps, how we have to get your 10,000 steps in. And that's sort of like really cemented in like Western culture. But actually that was just like a marketing ploy by in Japan, because they had like this like pedometer which could only count up to 10,000 steps. And they were like, how can we market this so it's actually useful? And now it's like a thing that, this arbitrary number that we all use. And I look at sort of brands like, Balenciaga or things like that, where sort of sometimes you sit there and you think, am I being trolled? Like this is what, like, it's always such like people can consistently like spend so much and they consistently buy and love different brands, and sort of building that up and finding ways to connect with people has been something that I've always been really interested in, and something that I wanted to explore more and potentially work in.
Okay.
I've been sort of surprised by it. I'm surprised how much that I've liked it. And so, I think the general consensus is that you sort of get to you speak with people, and about like halfway through like first year, even that, people tend to be like, oh, my course is like, wow, my course. But I've been surprised that I've really enjoyed it. I think it's sort of been, there are times where you sort of sit there and you go, okay, well, this feels a bit like, common sense. But there are other times where like stuff that I never would have gotten, like I've never been exposed to more campaigns and to more work that people have done. I've had so much more awareness of like what is actually going on, like practically in the market, as well as not just like marketing specific, but like, business. And I had to do like a finance module and stuff like that I think I never would have been exposed to without it. And so I think that it's been really telling of like what I want as well, and what I'm interested within marketing, as well as like what I could potentially get out of my career. So yeah, it's been good overall, I think.
What has been the best and worst part of your course so far? Because you mentioned there's some parts that come as common knowledge and some parts that aren't as common knowledge. So so far in your first year, what has been the hardest and easiest part of it?
I think the best part of it is sort of like when you sit there in like a lecture or in a workshop, and like you're so, oh my gosh, this is why, I picked this course, and it just feels right to be there, and it feels right to be learning it, and it feels right this is sort of the sort of thing I want to do in the future. And I think that makes it one of the easiest parts, because then when you're having to do work for it, it's almost like, not that there's a goal in mind, but it doesn't feel as much as work. It feels something that, it's easier to do. You want to put a little bit more effort into it. I think the hardest part is 9 a.m. is always hard, especially for like, I had finance 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, and generally Durham, and I think most universities, Wednesdays, or like there's sort of that one day where it's like usually like in the afternoon, it's just, a day off for people to do like club societies. So generally when most people have nothing on a Wednesday, and you're sort of trudging down the hill on a Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. to do, maths is not the most fun thing ever. But I think apart from that, it's probably the fact that sometimes you sit there and it's like, okay, today we're going to do something on like social media, and it'll go into like the algorithm, and that can be really interesting. And then it'll go into something slightly different, and it feels almost a bit like common sense. And it might be because, we're like at our age just so native to social
media is a part of your everyday life.
Yeah, it's a part of your everyday life. So I think it becomes such of like, that's a bit obvious because, you see it every day in social media. Or there's some things where it's like, it's common sense, but now it's just like, there's a fancy term to it. And like now to remember that fancy term to do with stuff like, a lot of like psychology things that you learn to do with like persuading people and things like that. You're like, well, yeah, that's how you just...
Like, would an example be UX design? So how it's design, like the basic layout of it, but it would like they call it UX design because of the way this is put here, and this is put here because of this and this and...
Yeah, so for instance, another example would be like within UX design would be like, we'll learn about like the 7 motivators of like customer motivation, or 7 things of this or that. And then it'll be simple stuff like, if it is hard for somebody to go from the social media platform to the website to the app, they're less likely to do that. And then they'll have loads of different terms and theories. And it's sort of like, oh, yeah, of course they wouldn't do that if it's so difficult for them to do it. So I think that is probably the hardest part, is sort of like, sometimes you just want to roll your eyes and be like, yeah, of course. And sometimes it's like, now I have to do the extra bit, remember the theory. I think that's probably the worst part of it.
Okay. And if we now go into Durham University, what are the best and worst things about studying at Durham University? Starting off with the worst so far, as you've only been there for a year, so these are still new. But so far, what are some hurdles you faced?
I think university in general is probably like finding your footing and like figuring out, you know, okay, what is academic writing? How do I structure my day? Especially when, like, for me, I have 8 hours of like lectures and like 8 contact hours. The rest is just free time. And compared to other sort of courses like engineering, which can have like, you know, sometimes like 20, they can have like a full week. It's like a very different. So it's like, plus, even though this is somewhat in sixth form, there really is like no reason to do work. And I mean that by like, there is no one that's going to be like, if I don't do the reading, no one's going to know. Or if they do know, they're not really going to care that I haven't done the reading. Yeah, no one's going to be there looking at me. Like, maybe like I have a friend who'll be like, oh my gosh, you haven't started the assignment yet. But apart from that, there is like no reason until it gets to an exam or to an assignment that that I've been doing what I need to do. And so I think doing all of that, and as a fresher, meeting new people, trying to try a new thing, trying to find out how to relax, all of that is sometimes feels like you're doing everything and it's loads, or you'll feel like you're doing nothing. And I think that's university in general is a bit of like it's a real like transition.
In your face.
Yeah. And then Durham specifically, and this is for a lot of people not a big deal, but coming from someone who's like been around like Hertfordshire and London, the fact that everywhere is a hill is like, I have never done as much walking as I do in Durham, and it's colder than London and the hills, and it has been a lot for me. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's a small thing for most people, but it's a big thing for me because I'm not like a huge exercise person. So yeah, the hills have been a lot.
So far, coming from London, do you feel like you've been able to adapt to the Durham lifestyle? As you said, the weather's different, the hills are different. Do you feel like it's something easily adapted to you, or do you feel it's going to take a bit more time?
The cold, it took a little bit of time for me, but then now I go back home and like it actually feels warmer than I think like other people, like my parents and my family feel like, oh my gosh, it's so fun. I'm actually quite warm. So the cold, by sort of like Christmas time, I had to do it, but I was like really cold in the beginning. But I think like the general lifestyle of things, you tend to find that actually a lot of people in Durham are like, there is like a significant amount who are like from Durham, but like so many people are from like Cambridge and from London. And so you tend to find that they've sort of changed the way the Durham culture is. Like if you're within like town with locals, it's very different to like as a student, I think. And because there's quite a big international community, the culture in Durham is a bit of a mismatch of things. And it's just, yeah, so I think it's quite easy to pick up on things. And if you want a bit more of like a city life, Newcastle is, 15 minutes away on a train and you can spend the day out in Newcastle.
If we now go into the best things about studying at Durham University, what are they for you?
For me, I think it's the collegiate system. So I mentioned earlier in my introduction that I'm in South College. So it sort of works like, houses in like secondary school, like you have your form rooms and stuff like that, in the sense where instead of just like going into like Durham University, I'm like in Durham University, but below that I'm in South College. And I think it's sort of a bit like organized chaos for me. And it makes it a lot easier, especially like in the beginning and you're trying to interact with people and find people because you already have something in common. And so when I'm doing like Freshers Week events, it was less so I was going into like a random club in Durham, but I would go to a Freshers Week event for South College and they would organize things specifically for South College. And so potentially they would also do stuff with like here, all the colleges are paired slightly. So I have the college that's sort of right next to us, which is like John Snow College. And often like right at the beginning, it would be like South College, John Snow College, and there'll be other colleges. And it's a little bit of a mix and match. And I think it's quite easy to be like, okay, I'm from South College. Where are you? Which college are you? And then it's like a really good point and easy point of everyone has something in common. You can always talk about all the stereotypes you had about the college before coming here. And I think it really organizes things for people. And plus like societies, groups, everything like that. You can find stuff that's like college specific. And then you can also find stuff that is like more university general. And I think it just brings it down to a smaller level, especially for things like sport, where you often won't want to go into like a massive like DU, like the main university like basketball team. But you can go into the collegiate team, which is smaller, less competitive, and a lot of people use it as like a building block before they decide if they want to go for the main team. So I think colleges and then just societies and groups in general. I don't think there's probably going to be any other period in my life where so easily I can find people who have like common like sports or interests, or like they share a TV show or religious belief or whatever. And I feel like every university has it, and Durham especially, there is so many weird ones that, you know, you think, what on earth? Like there's hummus society, ramen, champagne, garlic bread. I've used a lot of food ones here, but like they all come together each week. And I know a few people, and they just come together and they hummus or ramen or garlic bread, and they'll chat and they'll watch a movie while they do it. Or like they have all sorts of things. And I think whatever your interest is, you can probably find something at university and at Durham. And I love that. And I love that even though it might feel a bit awkward and weird when you first sort of go, if you don't give up, that you can quite easily find people that, you know, can be your friends and can be your people. So yeah.
So if we go first into the colleges, do you feel like being a part of the college gives you an identity? As you said, it's a talking point one, but do you feel like, because obviously in other universities, you kind of just have, everyone has their course and even society apart, but do you feel like with Durham, having this college behind you, it gives you a bit more support, as you said, and identity as a Durham student? Or do you think it's more of just a part of the university experience?
I think for me, it's more a part of the university experience, but I find a lot of other people consider like a real part of their Durham identity. I think that might partly be so because South College is like the newest college. So it opened up in 2020. And so like the first sort of year or two was like COVID, majority of it. So they're sort of really finding their footing, and like constantly, like a lot of colleges have like deep-seated like traditions and stuff they do. And so South College sort of like, it feels almost like a mismatch of other colleges, and they're sort of bringing the best of both worlds into all the colleges, and they're sort of really finding their footing. So like there are some people who are like, you know, South College until I die, and I'm like, oh, South College is cool, but you know, I'm not gonna like be like, oh my gosh, like South College is the best college. And so whereas I know there are other people who are like really like proud of their college, they're really entrenched into the college life, and I find, just personally, I'm not, but I find it more of a good talking point. That said, there are still sort of like certain characteristics that you tend to ascribe to people in different colleges. Like Collingwood, for instance, is another college that tends to be like the sporty college. And so, you know, typically if someone says, oh, they're from Collingwood, most people ask you, oh, you do a particular sport and stuff like that. And so I think there are still like, even though I'm not sort of entrenched in South College, I almost feel like I expect other people to be entrenched in their college life. And so if they're not, it's not like, oh my gosh, it's just a bit of an expectation I think everybody has in Durham.
And while at university, what societies did you join?
So I think, as pretty much everybody does, I did signed up for a lot in the beginning, and then quickly, you know, tapered off because I did not have the time to do that. And so in the beginning, I was doing like ACS netball. I was going to ACS, obviously, which I carried on doing throughout. I had lacrosse in the beginning, which I tried out because it was like, I'm going to do something I've never done really before, and it's a bit weird and not usually my style. I started rugby, women's rugby I did in the beginning. I did a bit of arts. I carried on through with the like entrepreneurship society. And honestly, like a few weeks ago, I just joined the school radio, because I was like, that's something I was looking up for a while, and they need someone to do with stuff within like marketing. So I applied for that. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are probably a couple of things that, you know, I went to like one session on, probably because they were giving out free pizza in the beginning, but nothing as sustained as that. Yeah.
And do you feel like when you join the societies, it helps you with university aspects that you wouldn't have been able to get without joining societies? And if so, what were they?
I think the main thing is like just meeting new people, finding new people. Like I don't go to lacrosse anymore, but literally yesterday, I saw the lacrosse captain, and she was in like third year. And I don't like stop in the street and speak to her, but it's nice to have someone, like there are certain people where like in my college or elsewhere that, you know, I know them vaguely, and it's nice to sort of, if I suddenly see them in like in a lecture hall, I can feel like even more comfortable.
Know someone.
Yeah, you know someone. I think that's really nice. And often there's a lot of people, like now some of my closest friends and stuff, we go to the same societies, or like randomly I'd be like, oh, I'm interested in this, and I'm like, oh, I know someone from this society who I can hook you up with. And so stuff like that, I think is really, yeah. And I think especially for things where it's like often one of the big things with like university is like, oh, you go into university, people are like, oh, practical experience. And I think people sort of underestimate how much skills and stuff you can learn being in a city, especially if you're an exec. So if you take on like a treasurer position or like, you know, president or social media captain or social secretary, whatever it is, I think that you can find a place there where you can like, a lot of people are there like doing budgets and they're having to figure out grants and they're having to contact like alumni and contact speakers to come in and to, you know, organize when are we going to do matches and when we're going to organize this and that. And I think you can underestimate how much you can learn and how many skills you can pick up. Plus, it's just an opportunity to try something new. And I don't think I ever would have picked up a lacrosse stick if I wasn't at uni. So there's that.
Okay.
This year, I'm in an accommodation. Yeah. So I think most first years get like guaranteed, or they at least get like priority in a spot. And I think it's been a major benefit in the sense that like a lot of the people around me are then first years. And so everyone is sort of together when you're all moving in. It's sort of a bit like, oh, wow, you know, this is university. And it becomes a little bit easier to interact with people. And I think that, you know, lots of people have like really great friends with the people they live with. And I know a lot of people who are now like next year living with like certain people who they lived in with this year. And like for me, I'm not like, I have nothing against the people I live, but I'm not particularly close with the people I'm living with this year. But even if that doesn't happen, like for instance, we were very then close to like the freshers events because they planned it around like the sort of area we're staying in. And so for instance, on the first night actually coming down from my accommodation, I'm walking down, there's a whole bunch of us walking down. I like lock eyes with another girl and like both of us, we just see each other walking down the stairs. And so we meet up. And so we sort of, you know, go to the first event together. We're friends now. Like she studies archaeology. We probably never would have crossed paths without it. And it happened like again with another friend who does education. And sort of when you're just sort of around and generally people feel quite comfortable with other people who are in their block because, you know, you're all sort of in this together. You all know your students and you tend to all be like first year. People tend to be a lot more open to, you know, random conversations with you and to introducing themselves and to things like that. And just helping people out, even if it's just like carry your bags like up the stairs and things like that. And I think that's really beneficial. I would say though, a downside probably can be that it can often feel a bit like a forced interaction in the beginning, but it's like you don't know these people often, you might not get on with them quite well. And I think a big thing known for like any university accommodation is that, you know, hygiene and often people have very different like sort of standards of, you know, what is like a clean kitchen and things like that. And so for instance, I'm in self-catered accommodation, which, you know, works great for me because I rarely eat breakfast. I have dinner at like 9 p.m. and like a midnight snack. And so I just could never be in catered accommodation. But I think that when you sort of have accommodation, it can be sort of hard to, you know, on top of that, figure out, you know, what is cooking like and sharing a fridge and all those sort of things. And I think there is a bit of a trade-off, at least with South College, because it's the newest college, it's a new building. So it opened in 2020, in which case like about a year and a half of that was in lockdown and there was no one actually living here. So it's very new. And that's one of the reasons why I loved it, because I was like, oh, you know, it's brand new. A lot of the facilities are very new. But because it's so new, it's sort of been like planted in sort of like the Durham campus area. Quite late, so it's like the furthest away from like town centre and the majority of shops. And so it's like I'm in self-catered accommodation, but very quickly you figure out, you know, how am I going to do my shopping, or when am I going to start getting like shopping delivered, because there's a lot of trade-offs I think with it. But I think ultimately, at least for first year, I would recommend it.
Okay, so you spoke about how you like your accommodation. There are positives being obviously it's self-catered, negatives being that sometimes the people you're living with aren't always the best. But another positive is you meet people that you wouldn't have met before. Now the question is, are you planning to stay in accommodation, or do you plan to move into a house?
So I'm moving into a house next year, partly because I think I wanted a change of pace, partly because with Durham, there is very limited space for returners. So to get priority, you're probably going to need you tend to need to be like on an exec or on a particular position within South College, like a college rep or something like that. Or, you know, you have maybe like a disability, or you have a potential other issue that would put you there. Otherwise, it's a bit of a lottery pick and choose who gets in, who doesn't. And so I'm moving out next year. And I think it also works a little bit better for me in terms of, I think it's nice to sort of see a different part of Durham, particularly because Durham is such like it's a small town, but when you're at uni, unless you go out of your way, it's very easy to only go into sort of the student areas, as opposed to like the place where like the general people also live. And so I think it works out nicer for me to get a different change of pace, to live with different people and things like that. So I think it's not a particular reason why I'm like, oh, I hated this thing, so I'm moving. I think it's just like natural progression, and the majority of people in Durham tend to move out for their second and third year if they're doing 4 years, and then come back for their last year.
And how's it been finding your flatmates a house and going through this process as a Durham student trying to find a house?
Oh, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. I think one of the things that I think, actually, this has probably been the worst part of the year. I've completely forgot about this, but Durham's housing market is absolute madness, in the sense where it's like majority of places for like universities and expectations to find like housing for second year is usually a lot later in the year. For Durham, most people start finding it in October. Within 2 weeks of being at uni, a lot of people are talking about, okay, what am I doing for the next year? Because there is like a rush of, okay, Durham are bringing in more and more students. There isn't necessarily that much more housing that's coming on, and like they're building stuff, but it's not ready. And so I think it's a big thing of like, housing costs have gone up massively with like cost of living and rent and stuff like that. And there's been a whole lot of, different things going on in Durham. But when you're especially a first year, you don't really know people, and you're trying to figure out, okay, who am I going to live with in the next coming years? It can be very hard to do it. I personally was like, okay, I waited longer than other people because I wanted to be, sure where I'm going to live. I probably waited slightly too long because it was a bit of a rush at the end. But I got a good place in the end for me, which I'm happy with. But I know like some people who like, they were like, okay, they was really scared. People were queuing until like 4 a.m. just to like queue back. Like a lot of people I know, like they came back from a night out and they just stood outside their agents and queued until the morning to get it. And that was like really common for like a couple of weeks in Durham. And it can often be like quite worrying as a first year, because you're like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know who I'm going to live with. And so that's how a lot of people, I think, ended up sort of just being with the people they're living with now. And then later down the year, I know quite a few people are finding problems, or they're trying to like get out and find a different place and find people to replace them now. And so I think with all of that as well, not to forget that it comes with the idea that there is like student accommodation, where it's like private accommodation. There's quite a few in Durham, and they go like that, like they go so quickly. And so you then have people who are like running like scams and stuff. And so it's like a whole thing where like you have to like really like, okay, set sort of like, okay, I'm going to live with, this is sort of like my point. Okay, I want to find something before this point, which I would recommend Christmas. I want to find something before Christmas, but don't get too worried about, within the first 2 weeks, being like, I'm going to live with this and this person, because you really don't know someone in those tough times. I think it's a little bit easier for me because it's a house, but it was like built and it's very student focused house, in the sense where it's like there's like a big living space, there's 2 kitchens, so stuff like that, where it's like it's 8 bedrooms, but it's almost done like a mini student accommodation. Like there are a few sort of houses around there like that, but the majority are like proper houses. So I think it's a little bit better for me where it's not as big as a transition for me. But I think the main difference obviously has been sort of the process of like actually, finding the place in the beginning has been quite different, because, with this, I sort of like, it was almost an expectation of, okay, I'm going to live in student accommodation. Durham sort of just like fed me the information. I had to like go through like a Google form. I'm like, do you want to live in student accommodation? Yes. They said, okay, you've been accepted. Sent me the form. I read through it and was like, cool, paid the deposit, and it was done. Whereas this, you have to like call up agents, you have to do viewings, you have to like go through the process of like the same way you would like buying a house or doing a house like properly. And so that whole process was like very different, and sort of like reading through contracts and like calling my dad, but like, is this right? Like all sorts of things like that. Is there any other questions I should ask? Having like an app on my phone with all the different questions like look out for when looking at a house. Stuff like that has been very different. And I think going into next year, a lot of it is going to be like, like you were saying, like paying and stuff, like the expectation is going to be slightly different. Instead of paying like just the money per it's going to be, you know, monthly, and sorting all of those things out, and, you know, doing stuff where it's like you have to be aware, like, okay, there's going to be certain bills and stuff that's separate from the actual rent and things like that, just keep aware of. And I think it's sort of in the back of my mind, but it sort of hasn't quite hit yet that I'm going to have to do this. I think another thing that's probably like the more pressing thing that's in the back of my mind, that's in the front of my mind, in fact, is that there is sort of this gap between like, I have to move out of the college accommodation I'm in like end of June, but I can't move into the new one until like July. And so you have this sort of small period where you're trying to figure out, okay, well, I'm not going to be here because I'm back home, but I have to put my stuff into storage, and then trying to figure out, okay, how do I get my stuff, you know, picked up, get my stuff delivered, all those sort of things you have to, you know, figure out quite early. And that's like another extra thing that I anticipated, but I didn't anticipate how much work it was going to be figuring out how much stuff do I actually have. Wow, I have a lot. Okay, how do I figure all those things out? And yeah, it's been an experience, but I think it's served me well, because I think if I was like in London, I think I probably would have been like too reliant on my parents to help me out. So I think it's made me feel like a lot more confident now in the terms of like next year or like in the future, if I have to do this thing again and sort this out myself.
Okay. If we now go into the area, you briefly spoke about how there's a lot of hills.
Yeah.
You're not too close to the town, and you talked about just living there in general, how the feeling of you have your students in this area around university, then when you go to the actual town, it's not as many students. It's more like you're a usual Durham person, not just a student. So what do you think of the Durham area in general, other than what we've already spoken about as a student?
So one of the sort of the area is probably my deciding vote for like one of the reasons why I went with Durham as the university, because I knew I wanted a very different pace from London. I knew I wanted something that was like more small town. Essentially what I did was I wanted to be sort of in this like bubble of like, forget the rest of the world exists and all around me as students. Like I wanted my student life to be very student focused, very student centric. And so I've definitely found that at Durham. And sometimes like on a Sunday, I'll walk into town and see a child, but like, oh my gosh, they exist. I've completely forgotten. And because you're just surrounded by like students all the time, especially because it's, like I said, quite separate. But I think it works out quite well in the fact that during term time, there sort of tends to be like hotspots throughout town, and there tends to be sort of within like the more residential areas, there tends to be like places where lots of students tend to gather. And so, you know, there's certain places where people will be like, oh, Durham, and there's all sorts of names that will be like, oh, Durham in Gilesgate, but part of Giles like Clay Path, and that's very student focused. And I realized that for you, I'm probably saying a bunch of different names.
It's for sure.
But like,
they will know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it won't mean like there are lots of like small pockets within like student focused within the residential areas, and like one of them, like, because it's so student focused, nearby they've got like the trampoline park and like laser tag and all sorts of things like that. And so I think that you tend to find that wherever you are, that you are going to be surrounded by students. And I personally, I love that, and that's what I wanted. And I know like a lot of people, they don't like that, but I find that it's really helpful, and to just sort of be in the mindset of like, you know, when everybody has deadlines, everybody's going through it. And so it's like the general vibe of like, you know, it feels like not like you're all in this together, because that feels very cringy, but it feels like the general mood is like sort of the same until when there's like a big event and things that people are very excited for. You know, it can be really easy, you know, sometimes where it's like there's like a big, I think something where like one of the balls are going on, and sort of like loads of people know about it, or like some sort of gossip has happened on like the university, like anonymous, you know, page or whatever. And like you'll be in Tesco or whatever, and someone will talk about it, and it's very easy to just turn around and be like, oh my gosh, yes, I heard about that. And because everybody's students, everybody sort of, the vibe is sort of the same with people, and people tend to be a lot more receptive. But yeah, that in terms of like student focused, but I guess it's also quite helpful that even though Durham is like a very small town, there are like loads of clubs and bars and sort of things that are going on. And I say this, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, so it was the kind of concept of you really enjoy it because it's big enough for you to have many options and different things to do, but small enough for everyone to know each other, but not everyone know each other, but you to know enough people to know what's going on in the loop.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even though like there is a lot of students in Durham, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of students in Durham. And partly this will just be because of like what my natural routine has been. Like I see the same people tend to be all the time, but I think it's very easy because of the fact that I will be like walking to lectures every week at the same time to sort of have these random people who I see, and like I don't know their names, but I smile at them, and it's sort of like there's a sense of like camaraderie and that sort of sense of thing. And I think that I really like that of Durham. Yeah.
What is it like getting your everyday things, you know, like your groceries, your toilet paper, your cleaning up stuff? Is that very accessible in Durham?
Yeah, I think so. I think like I have, because South College, top of a hill. And so it's like 20-30 minute walk into like main town. And so I do not want to go back up that hill. I don't want to walk. I don't even particularly want to get the bus. And so what I tend to do is I just tend to get like my groceries and stuff delivered in. And so that is the majority of what people do sort of on the hill. People just get their stuff delivered. But I think it's quite easy in the sense of like there's a lots of shops within town, like pretty much anything you need. There's like throughout Durham as a whole, there's lots of Tesco's and Sainsbury's, and there's like a Lidl or two. And then there's also like the retail park, which is like just a short bus ride or like Uber away, which has like, you know, the bigger shops, like your M&S and like bigger Sainsbury's and Aldi and Asda and all those sorts of things. So I think it's really easy and it's quite accessible, and there's lots of different things. Plus you can Uber Eats a lot of like the basic stuff, like small convenience shops. So if you really need, like you've run out of, I don't know, toilet paper, you can Uber Eats it, yeah, which is a bit weird. And plus, like depending on your college, some of them have like a small tuck shop with like the basics. So if you run out like and you really can't get something, you can go down to sort of the reception area or the bar in your college, and they can, you know, you can buy those sort of things. And like first week of Freshers Week, they gave everyone like free toilet paper and stuff like that, because they figured that's sort of one of the things that people might not have considered. And so stuff like that is quite easy. And there is like a plethora of clubs and bars and restaurants of all sorts of cuisines. I mean, take my opinion with a pinch of salt, because I'm incredibly introverted, so I haven't had the most experience with it. But there's like, there tends to be like Jimmy's, people tend to go to a lot, or there's like Clue, which is like, I mean, Clue is tends to be more of like a 1 or 2 and done, or for like social events.
Special.
Its claim to fame is that they're actually the worst rated club in the entirety of Europe.
Okay.
So it tends to be more of like a rite of passage
experience.
Where it's like, yeah, you go to Clute to be like, wow, this is terrible. And then like once in a while, there'll be like a social event for like a society, and people are like, oh, let's head to Clute. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that happen across the world. Like there's so many clubs and stuff and bars. And there's like the cinema, trampoline park, laser tag, bowling, you know, botanical gardens, if that's your thing. There's practically everything. And so even if there is something that you don't want or you can't find, again, Newcastle, 15-minute train away, you'll probably find it there. Yeah.
And what was it like ordering all your food? Did it come to something that came very expensive, or was it manageable of how much food you were ordering in with when it came to your everyday items such as your groceries and your toilet papers?
Yeah, so I've been quite lucky in the sense of I sort of, just before coming to Durham in the first place, I sort of like bulked up on a lot of things. So like I bought like several shampoo, and I bought, you know, like a whole massive sort of bag of toilet paper. So like a lot of the more like general things that people buy in smaller quantities, I haven't had to actually like look for. I haven't had to sort those things out, or, you know, I'd buy them when like I'm back home and just like bring it with me to Durham. But I think in terms of like a general shop, I tend to do sort of like 2 weeks at a time, and then sort of fill in the gaps in between if I like run out of anything or I need anything. And on average, my shopping tends to come to about £50-60. If that is very expensive, I don't know. You guys guess, I think. But I think there are lots of ways to get around it. Like, I don't think there's any student in Durham that doesn't have like an Nectar card and a club card. And I think that there are so many things that are like way cheaper, and you can save a lot through that. And plus, like, there are like almost every single shop in Durham has like a student discount. Like there is practically nowhere, I don't think that. And a lot of places won't tell you they have a student discount. So you might have to ask, or you might sort of see someone else be like, oh, I have my student card or whatever. But so many places have a student discount. And so like show your card, like even buses with it, show your student card, and you have £1 to ride on the bus as many times as you need. There's stuff like that is really helpful in terms of like cutting costs in Durham. And I think it's also the sense of where there are hills, but essentially you can walk everywhere in Durham. And so you can cut a lot of transport costs that you probably can't in other places, and things like that. But it's not too expensive. I think it could possibly be cheaper, but obviously I don't personally probably make the extra steps and the extra effort to go to places like Lidl. I tend to just shop at Sainsbury's just for the convenience of it. So yeah.
What general advice would you give to students about to study at university?
I think it's probably this whole idea that, you know, I feel like I've heard people always say, or especially like on like social media, that uni is the best years of your life and things like that. And I can then feel quite sort of like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, it can feel quite a bit of pressure to sort of have the best time ever at uni, and to do all these sort of things. And sometimes it can be like, oh my gosh, like I'm trying to just figure out this new course. I don't want to start 20 different societies, and I don't want to have this club and this thing or whatever. Or even just simple as I'm trying to figure out, you know, where is my next lecture? I can be like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to get there in time? And so I would probably say, like, don't worry if it's like the end of your first term or even like the end of your first year and like you don't feel like, you know, you found your people, or like you're suddenly like bossing your course, or there's even like a society that you like really enjoy or you want to stick with. And instead sort of like look at it the same way you'd probably, or at least how I'm looking at it is like I'm looking at it the same way with years like 7 to 10 in secondary school. And that, I don't know, I've never met anyone, maybe someone is like the unique person, but like year 7 was never, as far as I know, everyone's like favorite year of like year 7 to 10. Like no one comes in and be like, oh, I love the fact that I don't know really what homework is and I'm struggling under all this homework, which is crazy to think about now. But that, you know, you're trying to figure out, you know, what is the schedule, all of these sort of things. You're still trying to figure out, you know, what are my clubs and everything like that. It was year 8 and year 9 where, you know, you started to find your place. You knew the school, you had your sports, you had your clubs, you knew what to expect with homework. Those were the years where that was like such a good year of secondary school. And so I think sort of take it the same way, like take this year as like a year of transition, try new things out, but like also like establish what are your boundaries, what works for me, what doesn't. And I found that like sort of doing this is sort of, and like hopefully I wish I'd sort of done this more, was going to make coming into second year like way more exciting, because you don't need to sort of worry about all of that when you're trying to figure out, you know, there's going to be a whole new workload, things are going to level up. Instead, you can really spend it sort of enjoying it. And the next couple of years, like I can enjoy this summer because I've sort of figured out like, okay, this is the system that now works for me. So now I don't have to think about, okay, flip, first year did not go well, second year is now actually important. What am I going to do? And sort of like, don't forget that uni is years of your life, but it's like years, like 3 or 4 years more, depending on your course. So don't feel pressure to have everything like doing great and massive in the first year. And so, yeah, I think that would be my main advice. And then the second thing, and as terrible as this sound, is like, okay, I have to phrase this correctly. Okay, I'm just going to say it, but I'm going to explain afterwards, is that like nobody cares about you, in the sense where it's like, don't get sort of feel like everyone's staring at you, or like, I'm not sure if I do this or this.
Superstar
like,
syndrome.
Yeah, superstar. Like, you're not the main character in everybody's life. Like, forget about it. And sort of figure out, like, okay, you're the main character in your life, but that, you know, you're a side character in someone else's life. Or for someone else, you're just that random person on the street they've never met. And so if you decide you're gonna, I don't know, you want to take up running and you're running the street and you feel like super self-conscious, I am not going to remember you in the 2 seconds after you've run by me. So like, whatever you want to do, if there's something you're interested in and you want to get it done, do it. If you want to meet somebody, I've met so many people during freshers year, cannot tell you 90% of their names. I have not met them. I do not remember them. Like vaguely maybe on the street, I'll be like, I feel like I've met you somewhere, but cannot remember the interaction at all. So just like, if you want to meet someone, you want to say hi, introduce yourself, like there's nothing to lose by it, because if it goes weird, if it goes awkward, they're not going to remember it. So I think that's sort of maybe the second thing I would say.
Okay. And what advice would you give to students wanting to study at Durham University?
I would probably say, I mean, obviously, depending on your like experience and things like that, I would probably say come to Durham with a plan, in the sense of where it's like, I think it can be very easy to feel overwhelmed. And I thought it's probably the same with any university, but like often like the student room will have all sorts of like groups and everything, where they'll have like, you can sign up to all sorts of like group chats and things like that. And particularly with Durham has, in the beginning, it can feel like they're sending me all sorts of emails. What do I do? How am I signing up for the college system? How am I signing up for this and that? Being on a group chat, even though like practically none of you know each other, it's always tends to be people be like, guys, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can someone help me? And then there tends to just be lots of like different like break-offs with group chat. So there'll be like a group chat, and then there was like a girls group chat, and there was like a girls South College group chat, and there was like girls South group chat. And I remember there was one I was like, girls South College group chat who want to go to the gym but don't know how. And so like there's lots of different break-offs with groups. And even if like you don't tend to like stay in that group, like the South College group, we have it. No one tends to really talk until there's like a formal or an event that someone needs to question and someone pin the question, or someone will randomly take a snap of them like at a rugby game and everyone will be like, why are you shouldn't ask this? And it'll be like the group chat comes to life again. It's quite helpful in the sense of like often people do like a small introduction and they'll say, oh, you know, hi, I'm this is my course. And then you can get into like a course group chat. And it's quite easy then to be like meeting people in Freshers Week. And I know so many people who I met, they said their name and I'd be like, oh yes, I've spoken to you. I've seen your name on the group chat. And then things can go from there. So I think sort of have a plan in the sense of like find a group chat, usually a student room somewhere, someone will probably message you, or like go on the Instagram. There's so many Durham Uni Instagram stuff. Go on the Instagram and really sort of like be open to it. I think it can be quite hard with like different reputations, different sort of, you know, rumors that are going around. It can be quite hard to sort of figure out, you know, who am I in Durham? Because I'm not going to lie, it has a massive private school sort of attendance. And so if you are a public student like me, it can be a bit like, okay, you know, where, like, what do I how do I present myself and things like that. So I think find your group chats and sort of be open to people, and sort of if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, move on and move along, but sort of be open to things. And then if it doesn't work out on the first day, that doesn't mean you have to write it off. It can be like some of the closest friends I have, it was so awkward meeting them for like the first time, but like second, third time, and then eventually things start to develop, especially if you are not the most sort of social person. Yeah, I think that's sort of it.
And what advice, now that you've just about to finish your first year of it, would you give to students about to study your course at university?
Main thing, because it's something that I found that so many people don't do, and I think this is for probably any course, is like read the course description, like properly read what is like on the course, what is the course about, and things like that. Because like one of the reasons, for instance, I chose Durham was because I have like the course is set up so I don't actually have to do any exams, and that's something that I really loved. Yeah, so I'm like everybody else right now is chilling. Everyone else right now is like revising, getting ready for exams, and I'm just relaxing. Like I'm going on days out with all my friends on my course. You know, it's like it's very rare right now for me, and that I love that, because like there is this brief sort of stress of, oh my gosh, I have 3 essays due the next week, all that stress. But once it's over, it's like done, and then it's done like way ahead of time completely, like where lots of other people. So I really love that, and that was one of the reasons why I chose Durham to study this course. So I think really look at the course description and compare it across different universities, because it's one thing to sort of look at the rankings and be like, okay, this is like a really great course this is a really great school for my course, but you might come to look at it and be like, okay, it's a really great school, but it might not include something like digital marketing, and that might be the area of interest you're really interested in, or something that you think is like really important to do. So look at your course description, really figure out, okay, what is the course actually about, and things like that. For no other reason, do it for your personal statement, but actually you're going to the right uni as well. And I think another thing would be sort of like take initiative. I think that when you do marketing, it can be quite easy to fall into the trap of sort of just like going along with things, I think, or like getting too sucked into the fact like, oh, I understand social media, so I understand marketing. And very quickly you will get a rude awakening that social media is like a very tiny part of marketing. And so sort of be proactive in like reading other things and signing up to, you know, like free newsletters, or, you know, looking on LinkedIn and maybe connecting with someone in a part of marketing you haven't heard of, and be like, you know, hi, what is this part of thing about? I'm a student, I would love to know more about like what you do on an everyday and things like that. And when you're being really proactive, it's like a really easy way to stand out, because marketing can be such a broad field. And so coming out of the university experience, or even coming out and saying, oh, I'm interested in marketing, can be a bit like, okay, well, you know, what part of marketing? So I think if you have something where you show that you've put more effort in, you've been more proactive, it's way easier to stand out, and it's easier to get internships, and it's easier to show yourself as someone who is like about going above and beyond. And I think that's really important in a sort of field like marketing, where you don't necessarily have to take a marketing degree.
So it's kind of like that, specialize, don't generalize.
Yeah. Or if you're going to generalize things, like have a reason for generalizing things. Like, I don't think you need to be like, oh, I'm going to do SEO from like your first year. Like, be open to different sort of fields within marketing. But be like, for instance, I always say like, okay, I'm not sure what field I'm going to do. I'm quite interested in strategy, but I know for definite I'm not interested in like social media. And so like, if I'm going to say that, I need to be able to be like, if someone says, okay, you know, how come, I need to have like the reasons behind it. Like, okay, well, I've done internships in social media, or I've done this and that, and I've had the experience, or like I've read this article online and it's sort of brought this thing up for me that, you know, I don't think this is quite right for me, or quite right for like my skill set. And so it's like, have reasons behind it and have like more knowledge of the field and the subject than just social media, or just like a sort of like general public like knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, so just under a year ago, you were making that decision to go to university, to pick university as your pathway, but you also had the option to do an apprenticeship or go right into work. What made you choose university?
So I never considered like going straight to work, because I don't think I was ready for that and all the responsibility that comes with that. But I actually really considered an apprenticeship. And I think it's mainly because like, to enter the like world of marketing, you don't necessarily have to study like marketing as a degree. And so I was really considering, like, it's not like medicine where it's like, okay, I have to go and study medicine. It's like, okay, I'm doing this, but it's not something I necessarily have to do. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out like, why am I doing this? It was more important for me to be like, I'm not going to take on the extra cost debt if there's not a good reason for it. So I really did look at, and I did a lot of research about apprenticeships, but specifically degree apprenticeships, because I did want sort of the degree for like no other reason more than, I guess, the extra safety that comes with it, and that some places still will or even like require it to do it. So I was like, okay, a lot of like degree apprenticeships. But then I did quite a bit of research, and I found that often like there was the apprenticeship which would be at a great company, but then I wouldn't like the university that it was attached to, or it wasn't as well regarded as some other universities I could like by itself. And so I ultimately decided, you know, it wasn't sort of the thing for me. And I briefly considered, okay, well, would there be potentially the opportunity for me to, you know, study an apprenticeship but do it in something like slightly differently, like, you know, something that's maybe like an adjacent thing, and then it could be like an easy path route into marketing. But I found that, you know, I actually wasn't interested in anything else enough to actually study it and go forward. And so I think that because I had this awareness that I think, and most people do now, that, you know, there is the risk of you come out of your degree and you don't have the practical experience of other people. And so because I was aware of that, and I was aware that, but I still wanted to study marketing. It wasn't like I wanted to study like psychology or various other degrees and then build up the knowledge later on, like lots of people do, to get into marketing. So what I decided in the end to do was stick with the degree, and then I made sure that the degree I had a placement year, and that is something that I would recommend, especially for marketing. But if you can get it in your course, a placement year, I think is like so important in terms of, or like a year in industry, depending on what they call it at your uni. But like having that opportunity and being able to say, in my degree, I'm going to have a solid year at least, that is for me to gain experience, and has the potential for me to be like, okay, I've gained experience at a company that hopefully I really enjoy, and have the potential for them to be like, we would like for you to come back after graduation and to have like secured a graduate job before my final year. And that is something that was really important to me. And as well as that, I found that, you know, like for instance, now on next Monday, I'm starting an internship. And so things like that, where it's like, okay, if for me, the main reason that I'm not doing university is to go on to get experience, well, I can have my placement year. I can spend like my summer getting experience. Like I spoke about briefly before, the radio team I'm signing up for, and I've signed up for an exec position, which is in like outreach and online relations, exact link to like marketing and PR. I can get experience doing that. So I was like, for me, it was like I could get the best of both worlds. I didn't need to have that trade-off by not going into uni, and like I could still do this in a way that meant that I didn't feel like I had all this responsibility of a job and things like that. And I could have a more fun transitional period where I could grow up in like a very like, different way, where it wasn't too much. Plus something that I think was important to me, probably important to my like parents as well, is like I left the house. And so I think for most people, uni is about the age most people for general, like leave the house for the first time, like for like consistently. And you learn so much more about yourself and like the way to live when you're the one that has to sort out, okay, well, there's no food in the house. I have to pack the groceries. I have to, you know, clean up my room. No one's going to say anything about me doing this, and that. You have to sort a lot of these things out yourself, and you have to cook for yourself. Like, one of the worst things is coming back from a day of like lectures and be like, oh, flip, there is no food on the table. I have to be the one that serves the food on the table. And so I think like growing up in that period is so important. And if I'm being honest, if I was doing an apprenticeship, it's so unlikely I would have moved away for an apprenticeship. I probably would have stayed in London and stayed at home. And so I would have grown up, but I think I wouldn't have grown up as a person. I would probably have just grown up in terms of like my work life. And so I think having uni sort of gave me the best of both worlds. And then there was also sort of the plus of the, you know, as far as like the research that I've done, maybe it wasn't the most accurate, or things have sort of changed or will have changed by the time I've graduated. But career progression was like a big thing for me. And usually I found that if I have my degree, if I have a placement year, if I've gotten internships and things like that, or like volunteering or part-time jobs or whatever, I am at a better position to get, you know, come in at a higher level or get better, you know, pay or better prospects and things like that.
You just spoke about how when you came to university, you're away from home, you're learning to do different things. You previously spoke about how now you're ordering your own food, moving to your own house, making your own friends. But you also contradicted that with something you said earlier about you being introverted. So would you say from when you first started and you came in introverted to who you are today with all these relationships you've now and networks you've now built, you've grown as a person?
I would say I've grown to be more introverted now. I think because I have been so aware of the fact that it is a transitional period. Like before, at sort of secondary school, I went to one secondary school and then I went to a different sixth form. But when I moved to that different sixth form, I knew people who had previously been at my primary school. And so I knew people, there was like about 5 or 6 of us who came from that secondary school into, you know, the sixth form. So I was like very comfortable in the fact that, you know, I knew people. If I decided I wasn't going to make, like I made new friends, but if I decided I wasn't going to make new friends, it wasn't going to be a big deal. Coming into Durham, apart from like groups, I didn't actually know anybody. So I was very aware that, you know, I have to like make the effort. Like I can't, like I can be introverted, and I've sort of tried to find a balance. I've probably been more by myself than I should have been, in more isolation, but I had to make the effort to meet people. I had to make the effort to do this and that. And so I think that I probably will have become more introverted in the sense of I've gone to the extent of making the effort that if I want to have a good time, I probably want to be alone. And so that it's been a sense where I've grown in the fact that like I found myself a lot more, and I found that, you know, stuff that before, like I figured out what do I actually enjoy, because I realized that, you know, often it can get very easy, especially when you're at uni and it's like no one's calling your name to come down to eat, to come down to do this, to whatever. It can be very easy to like in your free time to just sort of spend time sort of on your phone scrolling. And like it's not necessarily that you finish it and you feel bad, but like I never finish sort of scrolling through time, but like, oh my gosh,
fulfilled.
Yeah, I never feel like I can't believe I spent 2 hours like that. I have to do it again tomorrow. Like it's like it doesn't happen. So I think when I have that balance of I have time out with my friends, whether it's just like going to a restaurant and eating and having lunch, or like we've been revising and then going for like a walk to break it up a little bit, or just like FaceTiming as we both get on with our essays, or whatever it is, like going out to cinema, whatever it is, I found that I appreciate the time by myself more. And then in doing so, I also appreciate the time with family and with friends and things like that. So I think it's been like a good experience in sense of building up those relationships then helps me build up who I am and what my boundaries are and things like that. So I'd probably say I've grown, but I am still very introverted. Yeah.
So at this point, we let students have what I like to call a free for all. You can say what you like about what you learn. You can say something smart, something. The floor is yours.
A story I would have would be that there was my building at South College is like people are notorious like burning things and setting off fire alarm. And so there was one time where it was 3 a.m. and the fire alarm goes off. And obviously at first you're up at 3 a.m. and you're like, what is that sound? And then slowly, you know, everyone's sort of in their sliders and their pajamas, and a few people are coming back from clubs at the same time. Everyone's going around, everyone's on their phone, figuring out like, why is the fire alarm going off? What's going on? Just to find out that someone had tried to cook, not very good cook, burnt stuff. And everyone's sort of looking at the person, are you serious? What have you done? But in the end, because it was like we were suddenly awake, there was a group of us who were like, okay, well, we're awake now. And so they have to check all the buildings. They've cleared that, it's okay, but they're still going through and checking a few other things. So we were in sort of one of the shared areas in the lounge, and we randomly started playing. What was it? What were we playing? I want to say Monopoly, but I don't think it was Monopoly. We started playing a bunch of different games. I think there was an Uno game going on and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, it was like someone's alarm went off and it was 9 a.m. And we were like, oh, flip. We just stayed here and we were just sort of playing. And I guess all of that, I'm going to bring out a cheesy focus. We've like embraced the opportunities. Like there's sometimes where it's like really random. And like, honestly, I've never spoken to those people again after that night. And so like sometimes I smile and I see them, but I guess sort of like embrace sort of the good times and the fact that like random opportunities can come your way. They can feel a bit weird and you can feel about it a bit like, oh, I just want to go back to bed. But it can also feel like just like a good night, and it doesn't have to become a forever friendship. It can just be like a good sort of experience, be like, oh, that was really fun, and sort of move on with your life, but you've had a good time in that.